With the release of Bannerlord 1.2 going into beta and bringing in a whole wealth of new features, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to dive in and take a look at some of the features that are still lacking from the game, and this primarily revolves around the late game. I personally think the release of the game 1.1 and now 1.2 has done a great amount for the actual game itself, adding in so many awesome features to make the game feel that little bit more complete. However, the late game is still vastly lacking, and I really hope that they address, at least in the next big content patch, whenever that may be, because the late game, at least in my opinion, does just feel very grindy, and realistically there just isn't that much to do besides fight battle after battle after battle, which, as I mentioned, can get just a little bit boring. So yeah, in this video I'm going to go ahead and talk about probably 5 things that I think will be an amazing godsend to be added into the next big content patch. To be fair, I would honestly just like to see one of these being added, but hey, a man can drink. And again, this is just my opinion. If you think these ideas are stupid, let me know down below in the comments. Give me some of your own. What would you like to see them add in the next big content update? So let's start off with an obvious one. It's diplomacy. People have been asking for it for ages, and I think this could go a really long way at making Calradia feel that little bit more alive. Having factions group up against one another would be so awesome. Having non-aggressions after war, alliances being sealed with marriages, actually attending weddings could be so much fun, and just uniting against a greater threat could be awesome. Like, imagine if there was a way for the Empire factions to combine into one big mega faction once again. You know, someone actually wins the civil war and then the other factions surrounding them all gang up on them. Like, actually get what the lore of Calradia before you actually dive into the campaign of Bannerlord is all about. That stuff would just sound so awesome. Having this like big mega war to end your campaign, yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and I feel like diplomacy is the ultimate way of going about that. Now, of course, we do already have a mod called Diplomacy, and I think that does a great job at kind of just showing you what this game could be. Again, it does as much as it can do. Obviously, the foundations just aren't there for them to really take it further. The Diplomacy mod does let you form alliances. It does let you form non-aggressions. All that stuff is great, but I feel like Tailworlds could take that a step further, and again, I think 1.2 is a great example of that. They actually implemented a lot of stuff that was already in mods in the new beta 1.2 patch, but they've taken it further. They've laid better foundations for other modders to then take that even further, and I think diplomacy could be a great one. I would also like to see actual proper peace treaties as well when factions do go ahead and sign peace. Like, the actual exchanging of settlements could be a really nice way of taking that that diplomacy to the next level. The next feature I would really like to see, and something that I think is very lacking in the game, is like a marshal or an army commander position in a faction. Right now we've switched over to play as Lucon, so obviously we're leading the Northern Empire, and I don't really feel like I'm commander-in-chief of the Northern Empire whatsoever. I have no real way of marshalling my armies towards an enemy front. Like, if someone forms an army, they go off and they do their own thing, and I think that's just a very missed opportunity. Allow me as the commander. Maybe it's like a marshal role like you had in Warband, or maybe it's just like you are the faction leader, you get to kind of dedicate this, but let me actually tell this army that's currently, you know, marching around where to actually go. Like, let me give it like at least some sort of like I guess guidance. Maybe not, it doesn't have to follow it to the letter, like tooth and nail to the death, but maybe if I told this faction, this army, like, I maybe drag it and drop it on a settlement or something. I don't know how you would do it, but basically let me tell this army to go and attack Makeb. Like, they'll go. They will obviously still assess the situation. If there's enemy armies which are too strong, they'll retreat. If Makeb has too much of a garrison, maybe it will kind of like pop up a message saying, I don't think this is a great idea, and then maybe you as the commander says, no, go through with it. Or then maybe you decide to do something else. But I just feel like, you know, kind of, you don't really get that feeling as if you are commanding this greater kingdom. You feel like you're still just playing your party and you drag lords in. But yeah, having multiple armies doing like different stuff would be so cool. Like, you could send armies off on raiding and really get that commander-in-chief feel. I like this idea. It's probably one of my favorites and something, but I think it would be very obtainable inside of Bannerlord. The next feature that I think just needs a rework in the game, is also necessarily adding in a feature, it's just a rework, is the management system. Like this building system, the actual kind of settlement itself, it's just very, very lackluster, and it's been in heavy need of a rework for some time. Like, I probably can't tell you how many campaigns I've played. I have about 1,700 hours in Bannerlord. Yes, I know I need to get to life, but I've probably looked at this vanilla screen like, I don't know, maybe like 10 times, like properly, to actually be like, oh, I need to build this, and then we need to go ahead and make sure that the loyalty's like this, and then the garrison's like that. Like, I just never ever interact with these features whatsoever. And again, it comes back to my last point about commanding armies. I never feel like these cities actually play any like interesting influence. Like, I'll maybe just queue up a bunch of buildings and then forget about it completely. And I think it would be great to see more like connection, I guess, between campaign map and the actual battle maps. Having like the type of soldiers that you actually recruit from these cities, like be tied to the management of the settlement. In an ideal world, I'd love to see like a population system added in as well, and then that population is like a proper indicator on all of these things. Like, you could have a population, and obviously the more population you have, the more settlement tax you have, maybe that levels the prosperity, and then maybe that population has a standard of living that actually does affect the prosperity. You could then split that off into like workforce and have construction. Like, you could then split it off into like town guard for security. Actually being able to improve the militia would be amazing. And having more of a visual impact for the actual buildings that you are producing, having different factions, having different buildings, having events pop up where the local populace actually asks you for stuff to do, you know. Maybe the city is in a drought and you have to make the decision whether or not you and your army bring them water, or maybe go off and continue your conquest. Having stuff like tie you back to the settlement, like having upkeep, maybe you have to bring them wood to go ahead and repair certain stuff. Like, having that kind of connection whilst you're doing stuff to actually have, you know, a castle to manage, something to actually do. And I think also being able to be the governor yourself would be amazing. There's so many cool perks in the skill tree that are like governor only, and like half the time I'm like, well, this is literally pointless for me because I can never be a governor. You know, why can't I govern the city and also command stuff? You know, like, I'm not always out on patrol. Like, let me do that stuff. Yeah, I think this entire screen needs a rework. They need to add in, like, yeah, as I said, population would be amazing. And again, I know Banner Kings does an amazing job. I think Banner Kings probably is a way too far for a lot of people, and I completely understand that, but a middle ground would be nice. And just, yeah, as I said, this screen, yeah, it is so outdated and so minimal, and again, just giving us more stuff to do than just fight battles would be amazing. Okay, so point 4, and I think this is a really exciting one as well, is like emerging factions. And again, I feel like this kind of builds on all the other ideas as well, like diplomacy, and being able to command forces and stuff, but allow like more kingdoms to rise up. They did a great job in 1.2 of actually making it so that kingdoms can be destroyed, and now that we have that, now that like factions are no longer going to be existing forever, allow there to be new ones forming up, whether it's through rebellions, which is kind of already a thing where a settlement does rebel and they'll form their own kingdom and kind of start off, but generally they do get crushed quite quickly. But what would be very cool is if maybe like multiple lords could come together and rebel all in the same time and form like a mini kingdom. Like, you know, what happens if, you know, 4 or 5 settlements all of a sudden go because of a rebellion? They really like that, they really dislike the leader, or maybe once one city rebels, it gives a debuff, and then maybe you can have like a string of rebellions and a new kingdom is formed. I think that would be really, really good for the game, like having more different factions to fight, a different landscape basically on the campaign map every time you take a sandbox on. And I think overall it just like freshens up the experience, the fact that multiple like different kingdoms can rise up, you know, like maybe just implementing like bigger and more important civil wars could be a great way of doing that, like having factions splinter and the ability for lords to join them as well, because when you leave a kingdom you can choose to keep your settlement or leave it, but it declares war on another faction. That could be a great way of having like, you know, just a big power shift in Calradia, and having that actually be announced to players would be awesome, so you can actually see that there, you know, there is a living, breathing world out there. And finally, I think this is going to be my last point, but it would be an amazing one, and that is late game threats. Games like Stellaris, games like Total War recently did it in Warhammer 3. do this very well. They basically go ahead and give you this like time of it you're playing, because I'm sure Tale Worlds can still see the data on how long people play campaigns for, and I feel like having that thing that you're preparing for, you know, to actually face this big bad, this final opponent, would be really exciting. And there's multiple things they could do in lore, you know, like maybe like the Khans to the east go ahead and form up this massive faction, and they spawn in and they have, you know, thousands of soldiers, and they just start conquering Calradia, and you have to, with maybe the new diplomacy system that I mentioned would be very cool in the game, you either like form alliances to deal with them, or you take advantage of the chaos. You could have Viking invasions from the far west, you know, maybe you get like African assaults from the south, an Oriental, you know, faction comes in and starts doing stuff, or maybe you even have like internal strife, like maybe one of the late game threats could just be that the Empire forms into one big mega faction and you have to deal with that. Or you could even do something like a great plague scatters through Calradia and starts killing off all the lords, and then that leads to the rise of different factions. Like there's just a lot that they could do with like big late game threats, events, which I just think would like, yeah, completely bring a fresh breath to the late game of Bannerlord, because then if you're working towards that goal, you can kind of almost, you know, just deal with the monotony of fighting battle and siege after siege after siege. And I'm sure there's plenty of other stuff as well that they could do with, you know, kind of a late game event system, a late game threat system, which could be really exciting. But yeah, that's going to pretty much sum up all my ideas for a possible kind of improvement to the mid to late game inside of Bannerlord. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think my ideas are stupid? Do you think that they're good? Do you think only some of them are good? And what exactly are your opinions? You know, are there certain things that maybe I didn't mention but you think the game does dramatically need to improve on, add in, or change? And before you guys probably comment it down below, I did leave out co-op. Like co-op is, I think, such a big thing that they would have to go in and do, but I just don't see them doing it. Though don't get me wrong, that would be insanely amazing. Like if they ever did do co-op, oh baby, that'd be beautiful. I would love that, but I just don't personally see them actually doing it. And we do have a co-op mod that is making some good headway, so hopefully eventually we'll be able to cover Calradia in a very, very cool shade of you and your friends' banners. But for now, unfortunately, we do have to travel this landscape alone. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and a comment down below. It really honestly helps out massively. Consider becoming a channel member for as little as $2 by hitting that join button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.